All right. Welcome, everyone, to Court of the Rings on twitch.tv/LotroStream. We're here every Friday starting at noon Eastern, and today is a biggie. We have got Before the Shadow releasing next week, and so we're going to be doing a special live stream preview here for today's show. If you've been following along on Bull Roar, if you've been reading all of the dev diaries, that sort of thing, a lot of this information is going to be familiar to you. But if you haven't, then this is all going to be new information. This is going to be about 20 minutes or so of a general overview of Before the Shadow. You can find out more about Before the Shadow on lotro.com. And then we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the latter half of the show here today. So let me go first. Everything looks good. Fingers crossed. Does this transition make it live? And can I get all of my guests unmuted? So let me start by introducing our executive producer, Severlin. How you doing, Sev? All right. Also with us here is Orion. How you doing, Orion? I always say Orion, but it's Orion, right?
It's totally fair. I mean, there's a server on DDO that's called Orion, so it makes
it's one of those brain wiring things, right? It just gets stuck there. So
it's all good.
Yeah. So how you doing?
Good. Excited to release my first major release in like 10 years. Because I haven't released anything since, God, before Rohan.
Yeah. Well, it's a very exciting time here in the studio, so we're glad to have you able to carve out the time to do this. Also with us here is Scenario. How you doing, Scenario?
Doing good here. Taking a little bit of a break from the holiday to come hang out with everyone here and talk a bit about Before the Shadow. So that's exciting, and looking forward to next week. It feels like I've been working on this forever, which it's been over a year since I started working on this. So
very nice. And then finally, to round out our guests here today, we've got Pinion. How you doing, Pinion?
Doing great. I'm really excited for Before the Shadow to finally be out in the wild and see what folks think of it.
Awesome. All right, so the video you see is video that was taken recently from Bull Roar, so it is, there may be a few bits here and there that are work in progress because of the timing of when the video was recorded. But we're going live on November 15th, and all set to be going live next Tuesday, so we're really excited to be doing that. Just wanted to kind of clarify the video that you're seeing here today. All right, so for those who really haven't been keeping a close eye on what we're doing here in the Lord of the Rings Online, we're releasing Before the Shadow, our next expansion, and tell people a little bit about what's going on in Before the Shadow here, Sev.
Sure. So we're super excited because this is kind of a different thing for us. It's our next major piece of content, but instead of doing it at endgame like we normally do, we're doing something that the players can start the game with. So we have 2 new zones. The zones are bigger than almost all of our previous zones. That includes like 200 quests, and we also have 40 missions. And the missions will be super interesting because it's our first use of a new delving system, which I'm sure that they'll talk about. And the delving system will allow endgame players to use the missions and make them much harder. And so that's going to be interesting because that technology can be used in other types of content. In addition, we have a new starting area, and we have, and that will allow players to not only have a new experience from 1 to 30, but if 2 different players want to start right today, it takes a long time for them to sort of meet in the middle. And one of the advantages of that is players will be able to start in the same area. Our beginning screen will give you an option of where you can start, so that's exciting. And then we have more ways of teaching you crafting and different things that you can play through. And it'll be nice for the people who haven't yet delved into the new race class combinations that we introduced with the pre-release.
All right. This is not just for low-level players. We do have a new skirmish going in as well. We have new missions that are going in. The delving system is related to that, and we are going to get into some of that here as well in just a little bit. So let me turn to you, Scenario. We have two new regions coming, Swanfleet and Cardolan. Tell us a little bit about these regions and what it was like making it.
So, like Severlin said, these are some of our biggest regions that we've ever introduced for Lotro, particularly in a content update. I think the biggest single thing we've ever done was the launch of the game. But since then, I don't think we've built landscape that matches the sheer scope and scale that we've introduced here. And a lot of that is thanks to some of the new design and development processes that I've been working on over the last couple of years, trying to help us streamline our processes a little bit better. Great thing about Swanfleet and Cardolan is they like connect Area Door together in a way that kind of makes it almost feel full now. Like there's still a lot of Area Door that we could potentially fill out in the future, but Swanfleet and Cardolan are big chunks, and they open up the Greenway / Old South Road, so that a player could start in Fornost and go all the way down to Gondor by the roads if they wanted to, which is a huge thing. I mentioned in one of my previous streams that if there was like a theme for this year, it was like opening up the world, and I think Swanfleet and Cardolan do that very effectively. One of our big design goals too was to try to make the vistas that you see when you're in those regions as like expansive as possible, something that could even potentially rival Rohan in terms of those views. Swanfleet is the lower level of the two regions. It's where you get your Mossward starter experience. It's where you start getting your feet wet with the brand new, more streamlined tutorial and first-time user experience. It's a great opportunity for people that want to try out the new race class combinations on a brand new character, to jump in and get a brand new experience for it. If you've created a new character, some people have created a number of new characters and they may be tired of the standard, Freeland progression. This is an opportunity for you to have a new kind of progression experience at a lower level. The Mossward starter experience takes you maybe about 5-10 minutes at most, and then you're right in the world, starting your own epic quest. And the nice thing about this starter experience, like Severlin had mentioned, was any player of any class or race can start in Mossward. So if you want to jump in with a friend, you don't have to worry about trying to find a way to meet up with each other in order to quest with each other. You just jump in, do the Mossward starter experience, and you're right there together to form your own fellowship. In Swanfleet, we have mostly ruins, but there are a few glimmers of civilization scattered throughout it. We have Mossward. We've got Dunlending City as well. And then there are the ruins of Carisgelabrin, the city around the Ringforge of Eregion. There's also the stores and the Storevales, which you'll get to learn a little bit more about them. As you cross the river, you're going to hit Tharbad. Tharbad is one of our other major POIs for the expansion pack. It is a former port city of the Arnorian kingdoms, and unfortunately has over the years fallen to a number of disasters, from wars to plagues to just to floods. Like it has not had a good go of it, and now it's basically a ghost story. Orcs have moved into it, and the people of Breland are very nervous about it and really don't want to go near it unless they can help it. You continue into Cardolan, and again, more remnants of ruined kingdoms, this time the ruins of the kingdom of Cardolan, which was a part of Arnor. There you can find Karanos, which was the capital, as well as other major significant ruins. In addition to that, there's kind of the frontier village of Herne, which everyone in Herne is a little nervous and apprehensive about new folks coming into town because the Black Riders have made their way through and stirred up all sorts of uncomfortable business. And they're just anxious about the presence of those forces in those areas. Of the two, I'd say Swanfleet is my favorite. It was my baby from the start. But I think both of them really, really achieve a level of open world landscape that we don't do as often as we might have used to, and we're employing a lot of our kind of newer world building techniques to really try to create something that's open, expansive, and really connects the whole game world together in a way that it hasn't in the past.
Very nice. Let me ask either Ryan, maybe Matt, or Rob. Before the Shadow takes place in the early part of the Lord of the Rings Online, so its main story is going to offer an alternate level path to players, along with an entry point into the epic story. So, what's happening in the world during the time period of Before the Shadow, where it's set?
Yeah, so this happens right after the Ringwraiths have passed through Swanfleet Cardolan and crossed through Sarn Ford into the Shire. So basically, the way our new intro and alternate epic story works is it sort of provides you a different path toward, I believe it's the Council of Elrond around level 32. So basically, these will give you a different sort of perspective on stories, interacting with characters like Boromir and the Rangers of the North in a new way, and sort of getting you to the Council of Elrond, sort of along with Boromir.
All right. So let's talk a little bit, I think, about the split in content. We have lower level content in addition to some higher level content. So let's talk a little bit about what's available for each group here. And I should say, I think when this is playing, I'm going to play a little bit of video from the new starter instance as well.
So Before the Shadow does include a new 6-man, which will not be released next week, but will be released in the weeks to come. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to play through, and so that will offer a lot of, obviously new end game play. And then all of the missions when you play at end game can be done with the delving system, which will offer different mods and different challenges for those. I don't want to go too much into that because I don't want to steal anyone else's thunder. So those will provide end game. In addition, that you will have people that can go and play the missions at any level. They won't be able to do it at delvings, and you can start new characters in the areas and play through. And anybody can go and check out the amazing landscapes for the area.
And yeah, the new skirmish as well has end game gear for players. This one has a specific new loot system for it.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. So this is a new defensive skirmish that's coming with Before the Shadow. This is our first skirmish that sort of plays on our back in time type content. It allows you to experience the fall of Eregion with Celebrimbor and other important named characters sort of holding out against the last final push of Sauron's army. It's a pretty desperate battle, and there's some really neat boss encounters, and we actually reskinned some of the old skirmish lieutenants so that they feel a bit more in place with Sauron's armies during this skirmish. One of the really neat things about this one is that there are 3 different final encounters. So each time you play it, you'll probably get a different boss encounter. You might have noticed if you were playing on Bullroar that you only saw 2 of them. That is because there's a very big surprise in there for players, and I think you're going to be really excited about that.
Look at you trying to don't be spoiling things. Also, I think that the reason that we want to talk, I think we want to go over delvings before we talk specific about loot, so that people understand kind of the whole end game loot bits and how it all fits together leading into the instance cluster for the next update.
Yeah, what you're seeing here is just very early part of the skirmish, and I agree on the spoiler bit, so I'm going to actually probably pause this video in just a second. So that sounds like a pretty good transition point then. Let's take a look at Delvings and talk a little bit about that. That's really your gig there, Orion, so why don't you tell me a little bit about the Delving system? What's up with it? What is it? I should also mention before we start, just real quick, sorry about that, before we start as well, that we do have some guides up for Delvings, and they're available on locher.com. So maybe a thing to kind of put up on your screen and such while we talk if you want to.
Sure. First things, I just want to say thank you to all the veterans out there. It is Veterans Day, and I want to make sure that we recognize the service that they had to our nation. And I want to get right into Delvings, obviously, because that's what you're all here for, is to know what's going on with that. So the Delving system was conceived as a way that we can provide content driven by the player, for the player, inside of our mission spaces. Missions are a bread and butter thing that we do nowadays, with players being able to get in and solo them or duo them inside of our different regions. Before the Shadow, we put together 40 new missions that are available. They're going to rotate on a basis of 13 to 14 on any given day. And you'll be able to go in and make a modification when you go into them to change the difficulty setting of each specific instance. That means that you'll be able to interact with the Delving Stone inside of the space by using a Delving Gem to unleash malice inside of the mission itself. Each one of these malices increases the difficulty by adding either new skills, abilities, or effects to the monsters that are inside of the space, and also increasing their general difficulty. This means that you are going to be setting your own difficulty level as you pass through. And we've kind of broken this into 3 different tiers, even though there are 10 total levels that tiers that you can actually play through inside of the space. But they're basically set up to be fairly easy or easier at the lower end, from like 1 to 4, tier 1 to 4. From tier 5 to 7, they get a little more challenging. And then from tier 8, 9, and 10, they're going to be very difficult to overcome. And the reason for that is that we wanted to introduce a new way to start intermixing and interlocking all of our different game systems together. So the loot system that we have developed around the Delving system is going to go through our barter system, but it's also going to be dropped inside of the spaces themselves. You can get any of the loot that's available through the barter system at the same tier, at the same level of the reward itself, starting at tier 7. Which means from tier 7, 8, 9, and 10, you have an opportunity to get the drops from the actual quest at the completion of the Delving itself. Regardless of whether or not you get that loot, you're always going to be earning Delving rewards or Delving writs that are used to trade up to any of the new items for armor, or modifiers that we actually have that are going to be used to update and upgrade items that you get in the skirmish or inside of the new 6-man. All of these lead to best in slot gear for those 2 particular pieces, and the gear that you can get through the Delving system is actually meant to be on par with a tier 3 raid piece of gear. And the reason we're doing that is we want the Delving system to be a new evergreen way to play the game. We want it to actually be something that an endgame player can go into and always be earning something towards their character, building up over time. So starting at tier 3 raids, when players actually move, the raid populace moves the tiers into the tier 3 raids on a regular basis, we'll be upgrading the Delving system so that the loot that's actually inside of that space also gets to move up into that level range of whatever the current raid set is. Along with that, we're also putting in new crafted items, specifically that tie into the legendary item system. So we're putting in new craft traceries that are available for players to actually purchase with the writ system, and then craft and then sell to other players. We're trying to reunify the way that the systems inside of the game work, so that every single system is actually related in some way, shape, or form back into the regular gameplay that you have become really understanding of over the past 15 years of the game's existence.
Yeah, it'll be nice for players to be able to pursue specific traceries.
Yep.
Rather than just relying totally on random jobs.
All right. So I think we've covered a lot of the main kind of bullet points of Before the Shadow here in terms of content and story. Things that are on offer. Anyone have something, I guess, they want to discuss before we maybe open things up to the community here in a minute?
I say let them ask questions so that they have plenty of time.
Ask away.
Well, that sounds good. Let's do that then. So we're going to transition over to a Q&A section of the live stream. So feel free to chime in with your question. I know we've got... Okay, there we go.
There were a couple of questions that I did see go by.
Plenty we should be able to get to here. So let me go get us back up to the top and see what we got. So, all right.
The skirmish is part of release, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be there at launch, and there's no restrictions for that. There is a quest in Swanfleet as you're playing through that could guide you to it, but if you just want to hop into it, you can do that as well.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. We haven't done a new skirmish in a long time, so that'll be super interesting.
Garther says, is it 40 missions? The Bullroar Estates mention 4 hubs. This person found 6. I think that was an earlier Bullroar release note. We do have more than 4 hubs. So, yes, 40 missions is the number. And tell us a little bit, Orion, kind of how that breaks down. Because it is a little different this time.
It is a little different this time. One of the objectives that we had with changing out the mission system was to spread where you could actually find the missions so that you weren't always just kind of cloistered into one area. We wanted to make sure that you were able to expand and really explore the entirety of Cordovan and Swanfleet. So part of the objective here was to take these new missions and spread them out into several different hubs. The hubs, there's actually 6 different hubs. It did move up over time. Some hubs have more, some have fewer. That just means that there's room for some expansion over time. 40 was a good round number for us to get put out there for the initial pass. And right now, the largest hub is actually kind of weird because it's in a remote area called Andrath, which is really no more than like a caravan that's been set up in the middle of Cordovan. So it's one of these areas that it has a lot of different spokes that go out from that hub into the different areas, into the different missions that you can play. But there are also missions that force themselves into Tharbad, things that are coming out of Swanfleet that allow you to actually explore different places like Kleeger. And I'm saying all these names as though you know what these towns are right now. But Kleeger and Glenhellig and things like this. But these are all meant to push or at least provide the players with the ability to spread out across the entirety of the new map, of the new expansion, to experience everything that the expansion actually has to offer.
I didn't catch
the mission system ended up being a great opportunity for people that, on our design team or in our systems team that wanted to play around making instances, like an opportunity for them to get in and do that. And it was like, it was funny for me because we hit a point where, Orion and some of our other designers were looking for places to put these missions that we hadn't done other content in yet. And I was just like, we're starting to run out of places for you all to build things here.
It's true. We did. We went a little overboard in what we actually created. It was really exciting for me to get back into that aspect of doing the job, because that was one of the things that I really enjoyed doing when I was on the content team.
I know we had mentioned it earlier, but in other kind of places on the forums and elsewhere, but I can't remember if we mentioned it during the preview here, and that is that we do actually have plans related to the delving system to expand it beyond the missions here and Before the Shadow. And we can talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
sure. We're planning on already certainly looking at the beginning of the year next year, putting the delving system into at least 2 existing 3-man instances. And those 2 3-man instances are the school and library of Thermerdane, which ironically happen to be tied directly to the Eregian area, which is not that far away from Cordovan and Swanfleet. Those 2 are probably the most played 3-mans that we currently have. So it's one of the greatest opportunities, I think, for us to really refine the system and make sure that it's going to work for 3-man, potentially 6-man, and potentially skirmish content moving forward. But it's definitely a system that's not going to go away. We're going to keep it around and make sure that we can expand upon it as we continue to develop the game, because we know that this is something that players are looking for. And the fact that it is a set your own difficulty, I think, is the most important part about it, and probably one of the most unique things about this new system that we're introducing to the game.
Also, very. Go ahead. I apologize.
I was just going to say, like, fun bit of trivia too. The library and school were both instances that you and I worked on together years and years and years ago. All right.
Yeah, nice.
So a bit of nostalgia going back into those places.
It is, especially since that was the prototype for our 3-man instances, if I recall correctly.
Very nice.
One of the interesting things about Delvings is there's not just one set of difficult mods.
That's true.
So what'll happen is, even if you kind of master the first one, or there'll be more and they'll change over time. And so you could be going and looking at new challenges for the Delvings, which is kind of cool.
That's a really good point. Sev. The delving system right now is set up to have 5 different variations that are available on a rotating basis. They're going to rotate it first probably every week. That may increase to every day, depending on what the actual playthroughs are like and what seems to be the general acceptance or adoption, I should say, of the player base. The other thing that we're also looking at is the team has already said that they want to put more of these in, so it's not going to be something that we just kind of throw 5 out there and that's what it is. So with the fact that there are 5 different flavors that you can potentially see on any given day, and then the 10 difficulty tiers, you're going to be in for different sets of challenges. And once we push these into 3-mans and 6-mans, the interactions that we have between the different abilities and effects of the mobs are really going to start to shine, because there are some of those experiences that you won't really get when you're inside of that solo experience. But once you actually see things up close and personal with a group, that's when you're going to actually start seeing a lot of these synergies start to really break out.
Yeah, I think it'll add a level of complexity and interest to some of the 6-mans, in that you'll play through the 6-man, you'll go up the tiers, you'll have mastered it, and then you put a delving stone in, and it's a whole different ball game.
Well, and it's a chance for players to kind of learn new ways to play in encounters than they're usually used to. I think one of my favorite things I saw from the various borers we did was someone charging into a delving super overconfident at tier 10 and was just like, I'm gonna champ it up and just AoE my way through this. And they got the variation that was the damage reflect, and they just fell over, instantly fell over. And I thought that was hilarious. It's like you go in thinking you're going to play one way, and you have to adjust how you're playing based off of the mutations that you're running up against.
Yeah, you have to be careful on that. I don't know if the damage reflect mod got changed, but
we did.
Yeah.
We changed it. We changed it so that now it is an effect that can be removed by the player. Yeah. When you remove it, it does splash to other creatures around, but you can always remove it and then remove it from the new creature that picked it up. So there was some feedback initially that it was a little too heavy-handed in its approach, and they wanted to see more gameplay around it. So that's what we did. We made some adjustments to make it more gameplay based.
Yeah, I think that the player feedback on the delvings and the specific mods will be super important for us to iterate on the system to make it fun and challenging.
All right. Oh no, go ahead.
I did see something about lag. Do you mind if I talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, totally. I'm mostly trying to stick to before the shadow questions first, but yes, go ahead. No problem.
There are 2 big updates going into as part of this update to help on lag, that deal with how skills interact with the quest system and how various places in the game that you encounter interact with the quest system, that we saw on the server side, causing spikes in activity that would probably lead to lag. So we'll be interested to see that when those go in, how that works. Right. We also have some back-end work on the servers and how they interact with transfers, which is why you saw sort of the transfer availability shifting in both games.
All right. Fingon wanted to know a little bit more about the skirmish loot in particular. Kind of what's this new skirmish loot system we're talking about? What does it do?
So it's actually a little more similar to how we've approached scaling instances. Basically, there are chests divided by the 3 tiers of difficulty for the skirmish, and they're divided into the solo, duo, 3-player, 6-player, and 12-player sizes. And they have, I think, the same sort of mechanic as scaling instances in terms of like the like hard and soft pulls on the loot. A lot of this gear is custom scaling gear. It's not like gear that's in the existing skirmish system. It's unique to this one. And also you get an additional bonus chest if you defeat the optional encounters that exist. You might recognize them from other skirmishes, the ones that have like the light blue text when they spawn. In addition to whatever they drop, like the little banners and silver and currency, you'll also get a chest for defeating them that has a little sort of evergreen loot in it. Those don't have locks as far as I know.
Very nice. All right. We did talk a little bit about retroactively applying the new delving loot system to earlier content. Any thought about skirmishes? This is its kind of own system here. Is this kind of a predictor of the future, perhaps?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're looking to do is carry forward any system that we have inside of the game to be something that can be utilized anywhere. And we know that the difficulty system that was placed on the Treebeard server is something that players do interact with on a fairly regular basis. And there's been a couple of questions that have come up during our previews for Before the Shadow regarding whether or not whether or not the difficulty system would work alongside the delving system. And the answer is yes, they're going to stack. So if you want a real challenge, you're going to be able to use the difficulty system on Treebeard and then also increase the difficulty inside of the delving to make it even more difficult for yourself. So when you ask whether or not these will be added to skirmishes, it's entirely possible that the delving system will be added to skirmishes. We built it with the notion that we wanted to make this something that was rather modular, very simple to implement, but difficult to master for the player base. And that's what we're really driving toward, is turning this into something that is an extensible end game effort that we can add whenever we need to or whenever we want to inside of the existing game mechanics and game world.
The skirmishes actually make a lot of sense because they don't already have a tiered difficulty system. There's a lot of them and they are level agnostic. So taking other skirmishes and adding this to them is a way that you can refresh the skirmishes and give them end game relevance. So we definitely are looking at that. Whereas the 3-man and 6-mans, because they have their own tiers, how they interact, we'll have to be more careful with.
All right. So we have a question about world first raid progressions. Is Lotra planning to support world first raid progressions more in the future? Question mark. Maybe sponsor? Question mark. I would say that we do offer raid related titles on a limited time basis. I would expect to see that continue, but I think this person's saying any chance of doing more than that.
I don't think so. So there are a lot of ways that the players interact with the game and create community events, this and music, and we don't want to force the players' hands in terms of how they do that, how they define that, and go in. The other thing is, by sponsoring it, we're basically saying that this mode of playing has an importance over someone who likes to explore and take the game slowly. And I don't know that we want to move in that direction where we're making the raid play seem like it is the way to play the game. There are many ways to play the game. Raids are amongst them.
All right. Speaking of skirmishes, Sarge asks on the chat, will there be other things added to skirmish camp NPCs? 4-level cap characters in particular, since the reputation tomes were relatively recently removed.
That's not something that's coming with Before the Shadow, but that's, I think, something that we've been mulling on doing, but there aren't any concrete plans on that at the moment. Oh, and to speak to the other question there about skirmish tiers, yes, there are skirmish tiers up to tier 3, but they're much more gentle than the scaling instance type tiers. So this would, if we're going to change that, that's something we would explore, sort of making them a little more meaningful between the tiers going forward.
Okay. Did we see something about new stuff for... Is that the one we were just answering, the new stuff for older instances? Will you reconsider the requirements for older deeds, like the Savior of Eriador, requiring players to do Thorog, such as borrowing the Steed from Valard 140 characters, that kind of thing?
I think that talking about the specific requirements of specific deeds is a
Yeah.
great topic for the forums, but probably out of scope. Like if we start going into that level of detail in here,
Yeah, I'm not sure we're really ready to give you a great answer at this instant. So it's something we'd want to consider and look into some things for.
I think that the March for next year will give some opportunities to look at where we can release River Hobbits. I know that I've been excited for them for a long time, and players are probably like, "Why does Sev keep mentioning them?" So yeah, we definitely want to do that, and we're looking where they fit in next year because we're going to be moving, I believe, through some of the areas where they might populate. Is that correct, Matt?
Well, it certainly doesn't help that we've been doing a fair amount of Hobbit stuff this year to tease people along. You know, we released the Yondershire. Before the Shadow has some more store villages, and that certainly does that does continue the tease going on. As far as like where we're going next year, I don't think any place that we're going is necessarily specifically tied to uh, anything hobbity, but that doesn't necessarily mean any sort of that kind of release has to be tied to what we're doing narrative.
Yeah.
All right. So True Paul tracks over on chat says basically, are we worried about ignoring the old zones? Maybe just sort of way to put that is what's the state of the old zones? What's up? If we're doing kind of an alternate path, what about the old path?
I will say that my personal experience in seeing the way that players engage with the game, I'm not worried about any nook or cranny of Lotro's game world going unexplored. It is Middle Earth, and it is Middle Earth for the exploration, and that is something that I think the majority of the player base is very, very engaged with. I think adding these new areas just gives players another fresh take on that world and another layer and depth to the world that Tolkien created and that we've been so fortunate to continue to expand upon over the years.
Also, now that we've upgraded that quest where you get a mount earlier, I think that being able to run around in the earlier levels with a mount rather than having to walk everywhere will also make those levels feel as though they're going faster because you can bop around and do that. So I feel that will make the new zones fresh as well, and that players who like a lot of alts will probably choose and pick different ones as they get sick of one or the other.
And those original regions all still have their own unique points of interests, charms, storylines, you know, and rewards that are going to be valuable for characters of the levels that they're intended for. And, you know, I think one of the best things about what we've been doing in the past year anyways has been helping provide options for players to kind of better pick and choose what things they're interested in doing and what things that they want to do as they're leveling up a character. And you know, I think we know going forward, like if we decide to kind of come back and do similar things in the future to like what we've done this year with the Angle and with Yondershire, there are other level breaks that we want to like try to help provide alternative tracks through. So in that question too, there was a question about stable masters and whatnot. So both Swanfleet and Cardalon have fully functional and fully featured travel systems within them that are kind of following our current modern thinking for how travel works, where most regions have connections by travel to adjacent regions, and then you will also be able to get to other major hubs from the major locations in those regions. So, for example, in Mossward, you can take travel routes to get yourself into Enedwaith if you want to. In Herne, you can get to Bree fairly easily from there. So there will be connection points between these new regions and the broader world as well, where it makes sense for them to have those connections. Trying to provide a breadth of options without making those stable masters too extensive and confusing. That's the challenge.
All right. This question seems to be for Orion. As primarily a solo/duo player, where does the delving system come into play?
It's meant entirely for you. The delving system is tied to the mission system, which means that it is meant for players who are solo or duo in the way that they typically approach the game, which means that it is meant exactly for you. It is. You may find it a little challenging the higher up you go. And I'm going to tie this back to two other questions that I saw inside of the chat. The first one was, what's something that surprised you about the way the players were engaging with Bull Roar? And I will say that I was surprised by how easy everybody kept saying the delvings were. So we took a look at it and said, we want to make this challenging content. And we've continued to increase the challenge over the course of Bull Roar and getting ready for launch, which means that at launch, it will be harder than the last Bull Roar that was there. It doesn't mean it's become impossible. It just means that we have continued to ramp things up and made it even more difficult as those tiers progress. But it's meant for solo players and duo players, which is exactly the bread and butter that we wanted to hit that with, was to make sure that there was now a track for a solo player or a duo player to end up with the same roughly level gear that a raid player can actually get to. And then I saw another question there about level squish. We've been talking about level squish and what that would mean for the game, and I think at this point our determination is that if we were to try to do a level squish, and for those who are not familiar with it, it would be taking the 140 levels that we currently have and consolidating those back down to, say, 60 or 70. It would really make it difficult for all of our teams to not redo almost the entirety of the game based off of the way that everything is currently structured. So we are not planning on a level squish anytime in the very near future. I won't say never. And Sev may look at me and say never, or he might say sooner. And but the point is, right now we're just not in a place where we can really do something as massive as that.
There are two different things, right? One is the level squish, and then one is the basically the statistics, because the damage DPS numbers are in the millions, and those are two different things. Level squish, I don't see the value in, because we have trait points associated with the levels, and honestly, the more that the player feels the progression of having more points, the better for us. We could easily go up to 200, 250, 300, and just have like various ways of spending trait points. And as you go through, hearing you get the next level and having another point to buy is very satisfying, especially now that we've revamped that system. So I don't know that squishing the level is going to provide us anything. That's an arbitrary number. However, the numbers on the actual DPS numbers and such are getting a little bit high. We either need to be able to show them to the players in a shortened form, or eventually squish that down into numbers that go.
Not to spoil anything, but we are currently working on something like that so that we can actually display things in a more tangible and perceivable way.
As long as we're talking about systems here, there was a question about. I see that now. Uh-oh. Yes. The new trait allocation. Players do have our trait points are being reset here with Before the Shadow, and it's part of a series of changes to do with the way that we are giving players their trait points. And can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. There's really not a super long answer for this. It's actually pretty straightforward. When we started to look, and this is going to tie into something that Sev said a little earlier, when we started to look at some of the aspects of the game that were impacting lag or impacting a lot of the latency that we're having inside of the game world, we recognized that there were a lot of the skills that were being used and any of the deeds that specifically were something that players had to go back to and do in order to complete those deed sets were directly we believe directly contributing to the overall lag that we're seeing inside of the game world. And one of the things that we wanted to do is excise that as best we could and turn that into an easier way for players to actually get the traits that are necessary. So that was the real main impetus behind it, was to look at ways that we could try to mitigate some of the difficulty that we've been having with lag over time. So that was the main reason. And the other reason is that we know that we're going to continue to expanding the game over time, and we wanted to give you another aspect or another way that we could actually tie this into the overall advancement of the game and your characters. So that's why we actually made those decisions. Was the fact that there was this other outside force that was happening, and the fact that we wanted to be able to move that up over time and not have to tie this into another system where it kind of felt a little contrived all along, because having to go back to an area of the world and do something that didn't necessarily fit with your character being so far advanced, it didn't necessarily create good gameplay experiences. Sure, it made you go back and explore different areas, but it wasn't the kind of thing that was really contributing to anything other than what over time, especially since you have to do it on so many different characters, into becoming kind of an annoyance. So we wanted to remove that barrier a little bit too.
I'm not seeing any immediate questions that I think we can immediately answer. So let me
I
see.
have a question for us.
Yes.
So for everyone here, what's your favorite part of what we've done with this expansion pack? What is, like, for you, the biggest, most awesome, most exciting thing?
You're gonna laugh, but it's something you did. Scenario. I love Glen Hellig.
Hmm.
It is the coolest area I think you've ever built. And because I built something inside of there, I have seen it from at least 5 different angles, and every single angle, I see something brand new. It's just a stellar piece of visual content.
It's all leftovers from getting verticality stuck in my mind
Oh,
from when we were working
don't
on
be
Gundam.
so modest.
I was
I
just
really
like,
like it
I
too.
want to build vertical. I want to build vertical, and that space was an opportunity to do something with hobbits that we've never done before, and I think it was pretty successful, especially considering stores in general are sort of meant to be a little hidden and off the beaten path. And with the exception of Lintrev, I think all of the store villages are pretty, isolated. Um, so it felt right to just like put a hobbit village on the cliffs. It seemed like it would be a fun and interesting thing to explore.
There is a question that I wanted to go over. For delvings, if you are on an alternate legendary server, you can do the delving system at the level cap of that server, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct. The delving system is meant for the level cap of whatever server you're on. So you won't be able to access the delving until you are at the level cap of the server that you play on.
Yeah.
All right. I apologize,
go
by the
back-
way. I'm muting my mic. If any lawn mowing sounds are coming through my microphone, that's what's up. Someone real near me is mowing the lawn.
Well, to answer Matt's question, I think for me, just the whole picture of the landscape and the stories we were able to tell in Before the Shadow. Swanfleet in particular, just having all these different types of peoples there gave us so many cool storytelling opportunities that are like really unique even from each other. And not to toot my own horn, but I'm really proud of the skirmish, and I think folks are really gonna dig seeing second age Eregion in game.
You should be. It's actually, having played through it like at least once now, it's pretty damn cool. It's not pretty damn cool. It's damn cool.
Well, I like that. Here's a question from Is It Jammer about the new gear and cosmetics, the low-level loot that people are going to be getting here in Before the Shadow. The question is, can we come out at level 32 or so with a good setup?
By good set, so that's actually a very interesting question. What does good setup really mean? Does good setup mean that I have a good cosmetic set, or does good setup mean that I have gear that's commensurate with the level that I've achieved? You'll have gear that's commensurate with the level you've achieved. Whether or not the gear set meets your standards for cosmetic appearances, that's entirely up to you, which is why we have the cosmetic system.
I think the way I guess I interpreted the question was, is it a smooth transition essentially
Yes.
in terms of the loot that we'll be getting from Before the Shadow into the other part of the game beyond Before the Shadow?
Yes, and I would go one step further and say that it is a better transition from 1 to 32 than it is in the current version of the game. So it's actually built so that you're getting the gear that you're supposed to all the way up to the point where you get to Rivendell.
Hey, that was part of the point of this update too, is to help
Yeah.
move, have a better progression experience through that. Whereas, I think before, when we were building all of these other regions, when we were first building them, we were kind of very focused on the region itself and not necessarily the implication of progression through those regions.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions here. Let's see if there's any kind of final thoughts, I guess. We have people asking about chicken play. I do like to ask Sev questions about chicken play when we do these Q&As, because I want more chicken play. So I suppose we could answer that. Are we getting more chicken play in Cardalon chicken play quest 1? Question mark.
I mean, not for Before the Shadow, but I don't think that I can prevent the devs from putting in more chicken play. I'll be honest with you. Even if I said, hey, stop doing chicken play, they'd probably sneak it in. So I would suspect that in the future that there may be more chicken quests.
The only chicken play I know that will never return is the chicken arriving in the Etten Moors. I know that will never happen again because I got a call on April 1st when we put it in and I crashed the servers.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, it was ages ago, but it was a wonderful, glorious moment because so many people were playing it and so many monster players were hanging out where the chickens were appearing that the servers just could not handle it.
See, I want to see like the evil chicken side, monster play. They show up, but they're about as big as a pickup truck, and ready to do some damage.
I have actually seen chickens as big as pickup trucks inside of our game.
Nice.
All behind the scenes. You'll never see them.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up our show here today. I really do want to thank Sev, Pinion, Scenario, and Orion for joining me here today. We're getting ready to release on Tuesday, so we have a little bit more work to do, and I really want to thank you taking the time out of your day today to spend time with us here on Lotro Stream to do some Q&A and show things off. So, all right.
We're excited about Tuesday.
Yes, incredibly excited about Tuesday.
Yeah, can't wait.
All right, I am going to quick switch cameras here, mute the Discord chat to prevent any kind of bleed through of things. And if you saw in the background, my cat wants to say hi. Lizzie's been meowing. So let's she hates being on camera, but she wants to go me outside. And so, she's bothering me, and she doesn't care that I'm doing a Before the Shadow preview. It's time to take me outside, is what this cat says. So I'm going to do that. I want to thank everyone for being with us here today on twitch.tv/LotroStream. We'll be back next Friday starting to play this stuff. And you can find streams all week long. You can find the schedule over on LotraStream. The archives get put onto YouTube and Facebook as well. And we really want to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a great weekend, everyone. And I'll talk to you again soon.